All right, welcome to the soft talk of the conference. I am personally not a fan of soft talks. I like good, engaging engineering technical talks, but I think that this particular talk is of value, so I'd like to give it. So as Chris said, I am the founder of Dockyard. And I'm sure by the time this conference is over, you guys are going to be sick of hearing about Dockyard because Luke was just on the stage, I'm on the stage. We got Paul speaking, Chris is going to be speaking. And then I'm sure you're going to get all of our marketing emails afterwards. Because anyway, to reiterate, so please hire us for your Elixir needs. We can do full stack application development, design, project management, quality assurance, engineering. We work with some extremely large brands, so Apple and Netflix trust us with some mission critical products. You should trust us as well. Come visit us, dockyard.com. And as I said, we are 26.66666 repeating percentage of the speakers at Lonestar ElixirConf. So this is my second Lonestar ElixirConf talk. I appreciate Jim giving me another shot because this is my first time being here. For those of us that were not here, for those of us that weren't here in 2017, I could not make it, and Jim was nice enough to let me try out giving a remote talk at a conference. I still to this day have no idea how it went because I had no audio or visual feedback from the crowd. So this can only go better. All right, so the goal of this presentation, the goal I'd like to walk away with, and hopefully everyone here walks away with, is to use this presentation, whether the videos, the slide deck, or just some anecdotes that you take from it, to bring back to your company and promote Elixir within that organization. I'm sorry, I have a throat thing. So the first thing that we as engineers need to recognize and come to grips with, which may seem like it's really difficult for us to accept, is that engineering and business needs don't always align. Your boss probably does not care about tech debt at times, or your boss's boss may not. They most definitely probably don't care about developer ergonomics. They don't care about the nice, fun reasons why it feels good to do Elixir. There could be arguments to be made that use some of those data points as reasons to build out good business reasons to use Elixir, but as direct reasons, they don't care. So your boss is going to need your help to actually upsell Elixir within your organization or defend the use of it, right? The worst case scenario is for engineering, if your company has kind of carte blanche to go ahead and make technology decisions, and they decide, okay, we're going to rewrite our application in Phoenix, and then 3 months from now, business is like, how come these features aren't being put out? Marketing has needs, like we have sales goals and projections in mind, and we're like, oh, we're rewriting everything, right? That's not a good argument to give. What's a better argument to give is data and some value propositions back to those that can bring it to the non-technical people to actually defend the argument for going to Elixir, or to sell Elixir in the first place, making it a good option to transition to. Now, to date, there actually have been some, call it prior work, prior art. There has been some work done to build out arguments for Elixir. The classic case, of course, is the great Bleacher report case study. Chris has done a bunch of blog posts talking about the scalability of Elixir. There are, in my opinion, this next part's an oversaturated market. There's too many Rails versus Phoenix, Ruby versus Elixir arguments at this point. That area has been played out. Where I'd like to see is more like Elixir versus Python or .NET or Java, some other languages and frameworks to do comparison analysis of, especially if we have outcomes. So if your company has transitioned from a technology other than Rails or Ruby at this point over to Elixir, and you have positive outcomes you'd like to share, definitely read a blog post, talk about those things. So these are the data points that we need as a community in order to continue to push the language and the ecosystem forward. And then finally, those that have shared their experiences, Bleacher report falls under this, but they're kind of a special case, so I broke them out. But there's a lot of our experiences with Elixir blog posts, which are excellent. Now, all of these are really powerful and good presentations, blog posts, videos, etc. But they all really kind of speak to the engineering experience of using Elixir. There's very few of them that speak directly to the business needs of a company and saying, from your perspective, here's why you should consider adopting this, or here's why you should head in this direction. So if I were to look back historically and say, okay, where is a good example of a technology that made a very good value proposition argument on adoption, then I have to go back to Rails, because I think that DHH's original blog engine in 15 minutes with Ruby on Rails is, bar none, the best marketing presentation I've ever seen for a technology ever. It's raw, it's really raw. It doesn't have the kind of like finished quality that most marketing material has nowadays. There's a lot of mistakes in it. It's famously referred to as the whoops video. He's talking over a pre-recorded video of him implementing a blog engine. But within 16 minutes and 12 seconds, he articulates reasons for adopting Rails in Ruby for both engineers and for business needs, which is actually really, really difficult to do. And he does it in such an effective manner that Rails, I mean, undeniably changed the way that we build applications. But through the years, this is 2005, through the years, I keep hearing from different technology and like framework and language sectors on, we need our own version of the 15-minute blog post video or something to that effect. Something that we have to realize is that time has come and gone, right? The landscape of what was pre-existing to Rails is very different than what exists now. In fact, the problems that we're dealing with today are significantly more complex than what the community in software development and web development was trying to solve back then. And so, what I'm putting forth is that the solutions that have to be offered, the value propositions that have to be developed, and the arguments that have to be made have to be more nuanced. There was an article, this one just came out about 10 days ago by chance. The title's a little bit clickbaity, but I think it's actually better said that these are 10 tips for explaining new tech to your managers. Most of these you can kind of ignore. They're pretty obvious ones, but the more important one is number 4, frame it in terms of financial impact. This is ultimately the bottom line, no pun intended, with how you want to actually approach and help defend the idea of moving forward with a new technology. So the quote from that particular section in the article, I'll just read it straight out. The point of any tech project is to provide efficiency, scalability, and tractability to a business process. The point of any business process is to provide a return to stakeholders, either by lowering costs, increasing revenue, or ideally, both. So what we want to pull out of here are 3 things: tractability, scalability, and efficiency. If we can build arguments around these 3 facets, then we have a pretty strong reason and value proposition for selling technologies into new companies. Not just me as a software consultant, but you as potential practitioners of the technology. I know that probably a lot of people here are already using Elixir in their day job, but my point being is that this video is going to get recorded, and for those that are out there that are looking to bring Elixir into their organization, I hope that this video helps. And I know that people attend ElixirConf and this conference and other conferences as well that are Elixir curious and looking to definitely kind of branch out, looking for new jobs, but why not bring it into your existing org? All right, so this is the order in which it was in the quote, but I'm going to tackle it from the bottom up. Tractability. This is traction, kind of momentum of the language or the technology. For those that may not be familiar with what Gartner is, it is an organization that does deep dive analysis and produces expensive reports for C-level executives, managers that don't have the time to absorb the ever-changing market, not just in technology, but everything. So they'll get quarterly or annual reports on trends that they should be aware of. It saves them a lot of time. And in April, there was a report that came out on, this is kind of like their roadmap of emerging programming languages and ones that businesses should consider for adoption. So in the advantage section, Elixir was the first one that was named. Now, some of these trend analyses that are pointed out here, don't look fantastic. It'd be nice if Elixir was like number 1 and 2, but of course, if it was number 1 and 2, then it would be well into its adoption curve. So it's trending up. The interesting parts here are that Gartner is, their belief based upon their analyses is that the next market phase, which is significant adoption of the technology, is about to occur within the next 2 to 5 years. So they're looking around like 2020 when Elixir as a more mainstream technology starts to increase in market share. The business impact that they spell out is pretty wide and varied, which speaks a lot to Elixir's flexibility. They talk about IT challenges, big data, IoT, machine learning, web scale, high performance, all the buzzwords that we all love. And they make the suggestion that you should seriously consider Elixir within the next 24 months if you're serious about scaling your business, creating a new business, and having a competitive advantage. Oh, hold on. There's a mistake on this slide. I'm sorry. Do you guys see the mistake? It's at the bottom. All right, there it is, right there. All right, I fixed it. I fixed the mistake. That's not the last time I'll mention Doc here. All right, sorry. Head of marketing makes me do it. All right, so there was a second report actually that came out this year as well in October. So the first one was April, second one October. And this one speaks more to the experience of using Elixir within your organization. It's a bit more like opinion-based, but what they talk about is that if you bring Elixir into your organization, you could reignite a passion for an otherwise kind of bland software development experience. This new energy being brought in by Elixir could actually re-energize your organization and potentially bring in new innovation, which is what all companies are ultimately after. Traction also is a measure of companies that are currently using Elixir. So if you haven't seen this site before, elixir-companies.com, Doomspork, who's one of the Elixir Fountain guys, he put this together, and it is just a running tally of companies that are using Elixir in production, which says right on the front. But I'm pretty sure that he does not go out and gather the data, so it's all community submitted. If your company is not on here, please add it so that we have strength in numbers. Some of the bigger brands that to note from the list are right here. And this is I think a pretty powerful list. There's actually a few that I could not put on here that we have relationships with that would not allow me to put their brand on there. But this list right here is extremely varied markets and verticals, and as well as application use. So Elixir has it's not in this narrow tunnel that some other technologies may find themselves in. The last interesting part I found about traction, so for this presentation, I actually interviewed probably close to 20 companies. And 3 of the companies, this wasn't an exact quote from any of them, but this is the basic idea, is that they actually, while they were happy like sharing some general data points with me, they did not want me to talk about them specifically using Elixir because they consider a distinct competitive advantage. It was their secret sauce. They did not want their competitors to get wise of Elixir and go out there and start using it because they feel like that it is that powerful for them in their business. That speaks volumes, and it should speak volumes to those that are looking for any type of way to distinguish their company and really improve their bottom line. So traction. Next is scalability. So there have been a lot of blog posts written about how well Elixir scales, and presentations and articles. There's this one, 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 this one. All right. So and there's a lot more out there as well. The Discord one. Some of you may have seen it in the past week. It was actually published back in 2017. It was on Hacker News. It was like number 2 or 3 again, even though it's I think a year and a half old article at this point. And the article spoke about their experience using Elixir, how they were able to scale up very efficiently to 5 million concurrent connections on the Hacker News thread. One of the Discord engineers, I actually did not confirm this, so I apologize if he was just blowing smoke, but he identified, or she identified herself as an Elixir, as a Discord infrastructure engineer, and noted that at this point now, they're actually way past 5 million concurrent connections. And the team responsible for managing that infrastructure is 4 engineers. That is nuts. That is absolutely crazy. Like, go into any other big technology company and ask them, you know, if they're managing like that much scale with that few people. The Bleacher report case study. This is one of my favorite quotes, so I like to talk about it. Before they were on Rails, they were at around 150 servers. After Phoenix, they brought it down to 5, which is they're down significantly. And then they just had 5 servers as redundancy. They actually felt like they could probably bring it down to 2. So that is, that's an order of magnitude scalability difference that was only possible with Elixir and Phoenix. Scalability is not just in your the technology itself. Scalability can apply to how well you can scale your team, your people. So Josh Smith, who is the founder of CodeCores, they're a volunteer coding application. He spoke to me about how they hired a graduate of a code camp. She was there for 9 weeks, and 2.5 weeks of training on Elixir and Phoenix after that. And then within 3 to 4 weeks, her code was being pushed to production. This is someone who had never coded before the code camp at all. So a complete newbie in terms of production experience. Says DeGroot, the principal engineer at PagerDuty. His experience with training and transitioning engineers over to Elixir was that it only took their team about a few weeks to ramp up on Elixir. Personally, I didn't put a slide in there. I have a blog post similar to that. When we adopted Phoenix a few years ago, I think it's 1 week to transition to Phoenix or something like that is the blog post, and that's what it was. It took our engineers about a week to transition. Now, granted, back then, the application structure of Phoenix more closely mirrored what Rails was, or Rails still is, and that has now changed, of course, and so there's going to be a little bit more cognitive overload that you have to absorb if you're transitioning from a familiar technology. But the point being is that retraining is actually extremely cost efficient. So companies are sometimes, they recognize the potential of a particular technology, but then they get held up by thinking, oh, if we adopt this, who's going to build it? Who's going to maintain it? And there seems to be a very rabid potential talent pool out there for Elixir. So in summary, for scalability, Elixir can grow with your business. In most cases, you're probably not even going to hit the potential scalability limits of Elixir. And in the cases that you do, there are strategies in OTP to get around that. Scaling your team is extremely economical. Hiring, going out to find and hire Elixir talent. There's going to be, they call it the battle for talent or whatever companies are doing. Everyone's looking for top talent. So in a world where everyone's offering similar salaries, similar benefits, different work environments or similar work environments, the differentiator for engineers is going to be, how fulfilled am I in my day job? And for a lot of people, every time you see a Hacker News thread, every time I go to a meetup, I hear people say, I want to work in Elixir. So there's adopting Elixir with the organization, I think, is actually a competitive advantage, not just in terms of performance and the technology, but going out and finding really good talent. And the training costs are pretty much non-existent. So efficiency was the next one, but this was not in the Forbes quote. I wanted to add it in because I think it's actually very important for companies. Stability. So I think that engineers are creative types the same way that designers are. I think that we shine, we do best when we're in a creative frame of mind. And I think that sometimes pulls us in the wrong direction. And I'm guilty of this as anybody. How often are we always reaching for the new and shiny thing, right? Without really understanding the costs for it. How often are we trying to integrate that into an organization just because we want to use it? The nice thing about Elixir, beyond it being based upon Erlang with that 33 years now under the hood, is that at ElixirConf last year, Jose got up and in his keynote, he spoke about how he does not have any immediate plans for version 2.0, which is very different than what you see now. Like, version numbers, major version bumps are essentially, marketing fodder. If you look, I like VS Code, but Microsoft's versioning scheme behind it is essentially just keep pushing it forwards because people keep gravitating towards the new thing. I mean, this has major debt for companies. There's the amount of so for the past few years, I admit I've been doing JavaScript development, so but it's that area moves so fast. There's so much change and churn that's occurring. So by the time you get your application up to date and start developing new features, there's a new version of like the 3,000 dependencies that your application has. And it's stressful keeping everything up to date. I think that sometimes framework authors and language authors feel the need or feel compelled to push it forward. There are clearly obvious reasons on getting from one version to another and pushing the technology in the right direction. But I'm convinced after seeing, being in professional software development for 20 years that marketing is a big part of it as well. So when Jose, he said two favorite things for me, but one thing was almost favorite. I was really hoping to get the strong types into Elixir, but maybe someday. The other thing was that he really spoke to his desire to keep Elixir as stable as possible. I think that for companies that are very tech savvy, that have been burnt on upgrade paths, that have, want a 5-10 year shelf life of their technology offering, that this is a huge value proposition that we're just not speaking enough about right now, and absolutely should be almost like upfront for people to see. And that's stability. All right, so efficiency. This is where I may lose some of you. All right, so because I'm going off, I'm not going to say off the rails. I'm going off the off the path. Whereas the rest of the talk was more, database gathering information from people, companies, or use cases. This is more my personal experience on not just the efficiency of engineers, how to make them more efficient, but also where Elixir ties into that story. So. Here be dragons, and there are opinions ahead. All right, this quote right here: how efficient your engineers are at completing feature development with high-quality solutions should matter. I went out looking for a quote something like this, and I can't find it, at least in the way that I am going to define and defend efficiency over the next few minutes. There's lots of PM-based thoughts around this with burn rate and maintaining quality, so this one's by me. But where the direction this is going down is, if you haven't seen this little cartoon before, I'm sure everyone here has had this similar experience, right? So you're writing some code, you're building up this significant, state in your head, and you're just starting to get efficient, and then you get lumberged, and poof, it's gone, right? So on average with me, it would take up maybe 40 minutes to an hour, assuming I had no distractions, to get back to that state. So right there, that developer lost about 2 hours of time. I've been very interested in psychology of teams, psychology of individuals as of recently, and so a term I've become more familiar with over the past year is actually called flow state. So flow state, for those of you who have not heard of it before, I'll just read directly out of here. A flow state is also known colloquially as being in the zone, so that should be a little bit more familiar with you. A mental state of operation in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized, focused, full involvement and enjoyment in the process of the activity. In essence, flow is characterized by complete absorption in what one does and a resulting loss in one's sense of space and time. Now, I'm sure every programmer has felt this at some point, right? I've gotten to the point where the sun is set, I did not realize it, my wife walks in the room and I get scared because she knocked me out of that state. But you're just cruising along, things are going well, you have like all the lines of code lined up in your head, you know exactly what to do. That's what flow state is. So I believe that every software engineer is capable of flow state. And this kind of term that was passed around quite a bit, I kind of died off thankfully, but this idea of the 10x developer, which is to say, like businesses start saying, oh, if we like pay a lot of money for one, if we pay like 3 times as much for one good developer, that would place like 10 like mid-level developers. I actually think the 10x developer is inside every single developer. I think that if you get into that flow state, then you're going to have an order of magnitude performance increase on what you're doing. So if that's true, then what does flow state mean for business? And should businesses care about flow state? I think they should. I think that businesses should do everything they can to enable their creative types, because flow state would exist for designers as well. But I can't speak to a designer experience. I don't know if you have to build up the same state in your mind. But losing hours of time because of distractions or because of other reasons would cost the business so much money if it was actually started to be tracked. So I think that businesses absolutely should care about flow state. They should be, this should be something that everyone's talking about, in my mind. So the 2 things that businesses should do and should start thinking about to enable flow state is to reduce all non-essential external forces that disrupt and prevent flow state, obviously. And then the opposite side is reduce all non-essential internal forces. So the external forces being like meetings and lumberging. Not that you can just stop lunch or going to the bathroom or snack breaks, or some people go smoke breaks, or I think going for a walk is actually extremely beneficial. But there are some external forces that are under control. There's internal forces that can be under control from the business side as well. Camaraderie amongst you and your peers at work. Any type of issues that are causing stress. I would actually define the programming language and tools that you're using as an internal force, because it's actually a very intimate experience between you and the language and the framework and the application that you're building. So this is my opinion. I believe, based upon my personal experience of 20 years in developing professional software, Elixir is actually the best language for getting into and maintaining flow state. This is not just me putting it in this here because I need to fill out slides. My personal experience with Elixir is that I can get into that state of mind much faster than I can with any other language. And if I get disrupted, it's much easier for me to get back into it. And I'll defend that position in a minute or two. What I will say, though, is that I'm not measuring it. So this is more like my observation, my anecdotal sense on what my experience was with previous programming languages and frameworks. On top of that, I've also been doing transcendental meditation for the past 2 years. And I don't want to sell people on TM, but the kind of the thing with meditations in general is they kind of all orbit around this idea that is like flow state. So like different things had different definitions of them. So like transcending is basically just what they mean by flow state, or getting into the right headspace could be flow state. So if you're doing some form of meditation, you may already be training your mind to more easily get into that flow state. So what I am not suggesting, before I move forward and start defending Elixir, is that Elixir is the best language for all use cases. I mean, I think that's just a ridiculous statement if anyone were to say that. I think that there's a lot of use cases where it is a very good choice, but there's some obvious cases where it's not. I mean, anything that's super number crunchy, of course, is not a fantastic use case for it. The other one is, I'm not suggesting in any way that if you take an expert in one language and take someone that is a little bit more junior in another language, and you put that junior person in a flow state, that they're going to outperform the expert. I'm not suggesting that. I think that if you're following me down this path of this hypothetical, then we're talking about people of comparable experience and ability. All right, so how much time is required to get into flow state, and how easy is it to knock you out of flow state? This is what we should care about in order to create the most efficient and productive software team we can. So my argument on Elixir in the funnel we're going to form to land there first starts at functional programming, right? So I believe that any software language where you have to maintain state and that state can reach in during the application, change the state anywhere else, is one that requires too much cognitive overhead compared to functional programming. Functional programming is very easy to build up, jump into anywhere in the program build up the state in your mind exactly what's happening, because you don't have to care about all of the kind of like issues you care about in OOP. So right away we're dismissing a bunch of languages. Languages that embrace error states and provide clear error messages and tooling to diagnose and resolve errors. It's not to say that experiencing an error during software development is going to knock you out of flow state, but experiencing an error that takes you a very long time to resolve absolutely will. You know, by the time you've been on Stack Overflow, you've been in IRC, you've been on all these other things, and you start opening books, you're probably long gone out of it. You want to stay productive, you want to stay moving forward. I think Elixir is very good at this, but I actually think that Elm is better at it. It probably has the best error message and suggestions and way to move forward. And a big reason for that is because it's strongly typed. So that's why I want strong types in Elixir. Please. Traditional hard problems are easy to reason about in Elixir. So I'm really kind of lumping this under concurrency. I think concurrency is a very difficult problem to reason about cleanly and easily. I think that it's easy to get into concurrency, but it's very easy to get your way out sometimes. So the nice thing with Elixir, of course, with OTP is that you get a lot of tooling in order to give you a coding experience that actually makes it almost kind of guilty how easy it is to write concurrent code and keep it going at scale. This is, I think, extremely meaningful is the documentation and quality documentation that exists in the Elixir community. So it's interesting because I was thinking about this today, and I was like, I don't think that, I've been around Elixir since before 1.0, but I don't remember any kind of like moment where the community all of a sudden came up and said, we must do good documentation. I think it all just came about because Jose did good documentation. Everyone just felt the peer pressure to follow along. I could be wrong, but in my experience, I think Elixir probably has some of the best documentation of any language out there and ecosystem that's out there. And finally, this is extremely opinionated, but I think the syntax helps build out a good case for flow state. For me personally, I have a hard time buying into language and being productive in it if the syntax and some of the APIs are just grinding my gears, right? And Elixir, and this is where it's going into that it feels good, man. Like it has that conversational syntax that Smalltalk and Ruby had, of course, but a lot of the API decisions that have been made have some really good common sense reasons for doing them. Areas where, I don't like JavaScript syntax at all. Erlang syntax, the Prolog syntax, I'm not a fan of. The Elm commas at the beginning, the Haskell syntax drives me nuts. So I like, personally, it does not weigh on my mind at all when I'm writing Elixir. And so things that are not distracting me are keeping me in that state of mind. So that is flow state. I'm very interested in this as a topic. I think that, imagine if you could, as a business, just get your team into flow state on a consistent basis all the time. And just, imagine how much more productive and like how much farther ahead your company would be. So I think that companies of the future should be considering this as a management technique and looking for ways to enable it. I, however, again, will state that I have no data backing this up other than my personal experience, but as Chris pointed out, I like to sponsor and pay for things. So I would be more than happy to actually pay for a study done. Like we can do like a 3 or 5 year study, whatever type of sample size we need, get enough data actually proving or disproving this point. And if Elixir rises to the top, I think that's great. But I believe very strongly that this is something that should be on everyone's radar. If anyone happens to know someone that has experience or knows someone that has experience doing these type of studies, then I'd be really interested in talking to them and seeing if we can move forward with something like this. I think that if this is true and there's meaningful things that come out of it, I think it's bigger than just the Elixir community. I think it would be something very impactful for programming communities in general. All right, so the topics we covered were for trying to sell Elixir into your organization is your business is probably going to be caring about traction. They're going to care about whether this is an emerging technology or if it's falling off the map. If there are direct competitors or other big brands that they trust that are currently using it. Scalability of the language, of course, is very important. Knowing that there's room to grow within it. Scaling out your team, being able to easily hire top talent or retrain existing talent. Stability, again, I think is very, very important. Knowing that whatever you start writing today isn't going to be outdated and require constant maintenance at cost tomorrow. And then efficiency of your team at that point, getting them into that headspace where they are just cruising and writing code as easily as possible. I believe that all these reasons are good reasons to adopt Elixir and that businesses should be paying attention to them. So again, here's my marketing slide. In addition to hiring us, you could come work for us as well. We're a remote company, and we're always hiring good people. So that's my talk. Thank you.